say another man standing that is not the father, and you got this struggle with dealing with a man who's not your father. They're trying to tell you what to do, which just like the system. I think if we're going to fix the child, we've got to fix the home. I think the parenting process is what's hurting.
I agree. Mr. Pastor Parker, you have anything to add to that question?
Well, they took all the great answers, and I agree with all of them. I'll go the other direction to agreeing with them. If we start earlier, they talked about the home. There's a lack of priority for front end diversionary programming in the very beginning. The diversion programming that we have can't be an act of disposition after they get a charge, but there has to be a reaching out to at-risk youth before they are charged. It's proven that the more time a youth spends in the system, the higher the recidivism rate is going to be. The problem is, and someone had already said it, funding is always slow until there's a crisis. More assessment centers that are diversionary need to be set up that allows parents and schools, even police, to refer youth who would have been charged with unruly or low-level charges. If we hit hard on the front end, then we won't have so much on the back end. After release, we talk about reentry, rehabilitation, but you can't really rehabilitate someone who hasn't been habilitated in the first place. And that goes to family structure. They were never in, so they can't re-enter because they were never really in there. But upon release, we have to spend time. They did time, and now we have to occupy their time, but not trying to make them fit into any particular mold or program. We have to find programs that are strength-based for that particular youth. We have to explore what they enjoy. And there's a lot of evidence-based programming there. We have to spend time, since they did time, and learn what we can do that's going to make it enjoyable for them. Because if we occupy their time, the idle mind is the devil's workshop.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So with JDAI, it consists of 8 core strategies. And one of those is improving racial and ethnic equity by examining data to identify policies and practice that may disadvantage youth of color at various stages of the process, and pursuing strategies to ensure a more level playing field for the youth, regardless of race and ethnicity. So just a little bit of data for you guys. In 2020, our data shows that 603 kids spent time in our juvenile intervention center. And of those 603 kids, 505 were Black youth. In addition, another 586 kids, which brings to Pastor Eddie Parker's point, the reception center took in 586 kids, went to the reception center. And of those 586 kids, 425 youth were Black. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the reception center, but the reception center is somewhat of a diversion for youth. Instead of them going to the juvenile intervention center, which is our detention facility, they get routed to the reception center for low-level offenses, and they have, evening services and different counseling services and stuff that they can link the youth with and work with the family on a volunteer basis. So there are some of those programs that are in place. But I want to ask this question to you. What can we do to keep Black kids from being swept up into the juvenile justice system? Let's go to Pastor Parker. Let me ask you that question first.
Well, one, we have to change the way we assess youth. The Ohio Youth Assessment Survey, I believe that's what the acronym is, OYAS, is a tool that most courts have to use because you need the funding, okay? But on that, even with a low level offense, if you go by the assessment as is, they're going to ask the age of the youth. That's going to be a mark against them if they're young. And here it is. Did anyone in your family ever been arrested before. Okay, there's another mark against them. And then the question is, does the parent have a hard time controlling the youth? That's another mark. So now this kid is scoring a 3 and they shoplifted a candy bar. Our assessments are skewed against minority youth because of the environment upon which they are growing up. So that's one of the problems. It is most definitely some of the assessments. And then not enough workers who understand how to deal with our population. I sit in court 20 years in Delaware County Juvenile Court, but I'm not in that capacity now. I'm here as a faith leader, I'm not talking for juvenile court. But I've sat there and I've watched youth who the judges or magistrates think are being defiant and indignant. But those of us who know our youth know that they're scared, defensive, and then that's a coping mechanism. We need more people that are making the decisions to be able to understand how to deal with us in crisis.
Thank you. I'll throw it to Pastor Lamarr.
Yeah, I just think that just like Pastor Parker said, I think from the bench to the police to anyone that deals with our children, they got to understand our culture. A lot of times when you don't live around them and they're not connected to you, then they don't understand you and you don't understand them. And there's always in a defensive mode. And I do agree, where we put our money at is where, our focus is going to be. If our money is on the tail end from after they have offended or whatnot, we're going to run into problems. But if we catch them before they offend and focus on the home and focus on the community, like there was the POW, there was the CEDAR program, there's all kind of programs that was put in place, but for some reason, all them programs got taken away and then the kids are still left there. Even in schools, for those children that did not have good learning skills, there was industrial arts. We had industrial arts where the kids was good with their hands, they learned things, and you keep the kid busy doing positive things, there'll be less to do negative things. So I think the culture sensitivity has to play a part, but then there got to be programs, things in place for them.
It's a good question. My mother is very big on teaching kids how to play chess. She believes if you learn how to play chess, that you'll be able to make those right moves and you can see which move that you need to make in order to get to that ultimate goal, which is one of the programs you said you instill in your kids throughout your program through your Project Faith program. So that's very good.
Because chess teaches them to be critical thinkers. You think before you act, so and every piece on the chessboard moves differently. It ain't like checkers where you just advance, but you got to know which way the queen moves, which way the king moves, the rook. Every piece you got to be strategic, and then you got to be 2 steps ahead of your opponent.
Yep, good point. Pastor Ford, do you have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, I think and all the good answers have been shared in this regard. It's good to see that we kind of think along the same lines. I believe that what we expect in the classroom has to be a reflection of what the system looks like. Because if you go into a public school classroom, oftentimes they're preaching these things like positive behavior intervention systems and restorative practices in the classroom. But once that child is deemed as unmanageable, they put them back into a punitive system. So outside of the classroom, all discipline becomes punitive, and it becomes corporal, if you will. And so there's a disconnect, right? So also we have that issue, and then we also have this idea of adultification, that they're not looking at many of our boys of color as children. They're perceiving them to be these threats, if you will. And so when they get in front of that judge or they get in front of that committee, if you will, right, it's either suspension or it's expulsion, or it's maybe you need some punitive punishment like a detention center. When in all actuality, I believe that, you know, we're at this critical mass with our youth, that we have to find a way to protect them, whether that's with our churches or with our communities, and figure out a way to keep them from doing that. So like things like chess, right? Giving them an opportunity to think, because many of our young men and young women aren't thinking. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making the decisions that they've been made, or they haven't been taught how to think critically. That if I do steal this candy bar, you know, what are the ramifications, right? You know, especially when I look around my family structure and I find that, well, you know, uncle's been to jail 2 or 3 times, or, you know, auntie's been to jail 4 or 5 times. This is only my first time, so I'll be straight. No, actually, you won't be straight, right? You don't need this tag on your back. And so we have to be intentional. We almost have to force our hand, because we're at a point in which our young, they're setting low expectations for our boys. Some of you may know this, but I have 3 sons. And I had to talk to a middle school teacher because she verbalized her low expectations for my son. And that's not the way that we roll in my house. And so I think we have to be better as it pertains to protecting our young boys and girls.
That's all great comments. I know I found too, kids who utilize or have to get into an IEP, they seem to be dealt with differently and looked at differently and moving in with their education system. And they tend to set these low barriers for our kids. My oldest daughter, she was on an IEP, and she was first identified at the Worthington schools. Great teacher, loved everything they did. And then we moved to Gahanna, where we're currently at now. And Gahanna worked really well with them. But when we were at Worthington schools, it was interesting because they suggested that I put her on medication, which the psychiatrist had suggested I did that too, because she had ADD. And I didn't want to put her on medication just because of all the things that I had heard about it. But I decided to put her on and try it out. But because it was one of those medications where it was a time lapse, it was only going to be in her system for like 8 hours or something like that. And I wouldn't be able to assess how she was actually doing. Only the school would be able to. So I decided not to tell the teachers that I was putting her on the medication just to see if it worked. We went back to one of her IEP sessions and the teachers were like, oh my gosh, she did like a complete 180. Like, I feel like what we did, what we put in place was really helpful and yada, yada, yada. And I told them at the end, I was like, yeah, I put her on medicine. It was like, is that what it was? It was interesting to see their reaction. Like, they really thought it was them and the things that they were doing. And in actuality, like, she really needed to have that medication to allow her to be able to focus in on the things that she needed to focus in on to help her to be productive in school. So yeah, the IEP is a whole nother different beast. So I'll just digress and move on to my questions. Do you all believe our community provides the necessary resources to allow success of our youth upon discharge from the juvenile justice system? If no, what resources do you believe are necessary to be implemented, and at what stage of the process should the implementation process take place? I think I'll throw this question to Pastor Lamarr first.
I figured you'd come to me. I think that there are systems in place, but I don't believe that the resources are coordinated. Like, there may be something in place that is not shared. If it's not shared, then it's not in place because I don't know about it, you know. And I think, and if we are to release children, I think there ought to be a set up mechanism, whether it's in the home, whether they've been released to, especially if it's in the home. There's so many things that the parents need. Just like if the parent cannot control the child, or if the parent life is out of whack, to release that child back into that parent's care, and there's a whole lot of factors going on in that home is broken, then I think you're just setting that child up for failure. So I think there are things in place, but there's a whole lot more that needs to be done. And I think it first starts with, the home. If we connect the church to the home, I believe at some place, sometime we've got to understand the connection, just like Project Faith. We got to understand there's a connection between the spirituality of the child in that life of the child, because people don't want to deal with the spirituality of it. But that child got to have their spiritual foundation in order to know how to structure himself to grow. So yes, I think that there are some things in place, but there's a whole lot more need to be done, and there need to be a coordinated effort.
Thank you. Let's go to Pastor Ford.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that there are programs in place, but I believe I believe in our community, the programming has to move from reactionary to proactive. I think right now we have a lot of things in place that react, to whether it's suspension or some sort of other issue, right? When you talk about IEPs, and you talk about 504s and all of those other acronyms in the special ed space, a lot of those things are reactionary, and for the most part, it's very, very difficult, from a resourceful perspective, especially when you have parents that are in survival mode as well. So when I was a SPED teacher, one of the things that was really, really difficult, it's hard to get, a single mother or, parents that are working all the time to take off work to come to an IEP meeting, right? You're struggling to, get them there, or, they're doing the best that they can. And so I believe that there needs to be a sense of proactivity with our youth. And so, I believe that a lot of the programs that are meeting our children on the front end before they see what's on the other side of that cliff, things needs to happen. So, and even proactive in a sense of, hey, you've made this decision and you've ended up in this space, right? So we do have this diversion program, but that's proactivity so that they don't go back, right? So that we do lower those recidivism rates, and that we do put them on a straight and narrow, or on a path that is beneficial for them, that redirects the cycle. So, for the most part, I do believe that there are systems in place, but like Pastor Lamarr said, there has to be so a little bit more intentionality toward the coordination of these programs, so that we're not stepping on each other's toes as it pertains to the work that we're doing.
Good question. Pastor Parker?
Yes, both of my colleagues have said it well. We definitely have some systems in place, not nearly enough. And many are antiquated. They're antiquated systems. And one of my colleagues said a lot of reactionary tools are in place. I applaud what's going on today, because this is not just information, it's collaboration. And that's what we don't have. Where there are a lot of good things going on in the city, but we have to make sure that people can find that resource. You can Google evidence-based programming, or this, that, and the other across the world. I'm not sure if there's a place in Franklin County where we can Google all of the programs for youth. Where we fail, I believe, is, and like I said, another colleague had already said it, a wraparound. I heard the governor put some money towards this, and I even heard the mayor talking about it. We have to deal with the root. We need more wraparound services. The kid comes out, and the young man, the young woman is still truant, but we're only dealing with the symptoms. Sometimes that young teen is playing babysitter because the single parent is at work, okay, and got to take care of the child. You talk about parenting groups and family counseling. There's transportation issues, but you think the parent is being non-compliant. That's not always. Drug activity is a big thing, but if everybody in the house is on drugs, and you're sending that kid back and say, hey, don't do drugs, and everybody in the house is on drugs. So we have to wrap that family economically, mental health, educational. We have to through motivational interviewing and time spent with that family, we have to figure out what they actually need. When should some of this start? Well, I'm big on front end diversionary, but if they're already incarcerated and they're coming out, before that release, there actually needs to be an effective team And the family has to be in the forefront of that team,
Mhm.
because that's where they're going to go back and live. So no matter what we think of that father, that mother, or whatever, we have to find a way to get them as part of that team, because that's where that kid is going back. And family means a lot of different things. That could be grandma, that could be auntie, that could be the uncle who is no relationship, but he's responsible down the street for an emergency. Sometimes a best friend has to be part of that team. If you're going to hang with that person all day, that's going to be much more influence than a teacher and a counselor. So before that release, a professional has to get in there and create a team that is going to be productive to deal with where the young person is coming back to.
Thank you for all those responses. Now, I will say this. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the new program that's in place. It's called FSU, which stands for Family Stabilization Unit. They are now in play where they have been at court. I typically go to all the preliminary hearings at court that is housed on the 5th floor. A lot of those hearings are now on virtual unless there's an actual trial, but FSU is there and they are willing to work with it. They started out as a pilot program where they were just with the Black boys, but they have now since increased the people that they work with to the females. And what their services, what they do is they try to, like you said, if mama has a drug addiction and daddy has one, well, no wonder the kid has one, right? And so what happens is FSU comes in and then they provide services for the entire family. So that whole wraparound situation is what it is that they're trying to do. So if the kid needs counseling because he has anger issues, well, you see mama and daddy cussing each other out back and forth or what have you, well, all of you guys are going to go to counseling now. So they do a great job with linking with the families and trying to provide that wraparound services. And I also will, sorry, I had to admit somebody. I also will mention Pastor Frederick Lamarr. I remember him way back. I used to be Judge Elizabeth Gill's bailiff for 14 years prior to coming into this position. And I know she would call on him, and various judges on the 6th floor in juvenile domestic court would call on various pastors or whatnot to come in and become mentors for some of the kids who were looking at serving some significant time at DYS. So Pastor Lamarr, is there any experience or anything like that you would like to speak on? I know this was not a part of the question, but it was just a thought that came to my head of, the court actually bringing in pastors to be able to mentor youth once they get out of DYS or wherever it is that they're coming from.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I've been working with the courts for over 20 years, and Judge Gill and Judge Brown and a whole lot of other ones. And they call me and ask me to spend time with the young people. But what some of the challenges comes is we don't have enough mentors, and the mentors have to be committed, because children can see when people are in it, you in it just for the money, or you're not really concerned or care about me. And then the mentor got to have a relationship with somebody in the home, because if you don't have a relationship with somebody in the home, you spend all this time pouring into this individual, and then they go home and then the home is still messed up, so then it creates a problem on that end. Most of the successes that I see is through our summer program. They come back, but most of them, I find that once they become parents themselves, like most of the young girls, once they have a child and they kind of grow up and they kind of feel responsibility, feel that they got to do it now because of the fact they got a child. Young boy have a child, he feel like he got to do it. And so then you can point to something, now that's your responsibility. You can point to them, and it kind of gives them a little bit more dedication, but they still don't have all the tools they need. But I just find that to be true, that most of them, when they have a child themselves, they tend to step up and get more serious about life.
Yeah.
Pastor Lamarr, can I ask a follow-up question?
If you don't mind, can you hold your questions to the end? I got a couple more questions, and I'll allow some time for you guys to ask questions, okay?
Sure.
I think you should want to put it in the chat too.
Yep, you can throw it in the chat so I can make sure I get it and you don't forget about it. My next question is going to be, talk to us about, and Pastor Lamarr kind of hinted to this already, but talk to us about some of the successes you know of or have come across that can be helpful in fighting the fight to keep our youth on a successful path versus re-entering the juvenile justice system. I think I'll throw this to Pastor Ford to go first.
Well, there's a couple of things that I've seen, and actually Columbus is one of the first areas that I've actually seen this in. But one of the schools that I was at, they have like a communities and schools representative, and he has the ability to build some very effective relationships with the students, beyond teacher, counselor, principal, in those regard, right? And so I've seen those extra, external people who have an internal role within the school be highly effective, because really they almost don't have a dog in the fight, if you will, right? It's not like they're a direct employee of the school. More so, they're there as a resource, and I've seen that as a success. And I think that if we can, figure out a way to allocate some resources and funds to be able to put these pillars in our schools, I think it could be seen as a safe space for our youth. Because oftentimes, it boils down to three things. Do I feel safe? Do I feel seen? Do I feel heard? Right? And many of our kids, in some regard, when they're at home, may not feel any of those three. So they're seeking those things at school. And if there's anything that reminds them of the unsafety, the lack of not being seen or the lack of not being heard within the school, we see that could be having a triggering effect. But if we have those resources within the school, I believe it could be beneficial. So those are some of the successes. And also, throughout the city, I feel like many of our churches are on board with seeing our youth become great. Right. For the most part, I see that many of our pastors, many of our clergy are quite involved in our public school system. And I think that's important, and we have to continue to be that. So wherever you are, your neighborhood church, wherever your church is, wherever that school is, I think we have to continue to fight to kick down those doors and be there for our youth.
Pastor Parker?
Franklin County has hosted, for quite a little while until COVID, the Ohio Juvenile Diversion Association, which really spread ideas in every venue possible to give our county great ideas and great trainings. I have seen youth come from judges in Franklin County on low-level offenses to get involved and appreciate that second chance in the programs around. If the opportunity was not presented to get that second chance, because it does exist in Franklin County, some of these youth would never have an opportunity. We have a young man in one of our program who was playing basketball outside in the street, and a car hit him, and the police gave him a ticket for jaywalking, nonetheless, for being in the middle of the street. But a great juvenile system in Franklin County, whomever he stood in front of, gave that young man an opportunity. Both legs were crushed. He was going to be playing basketball. He had lost all hope, but because he had gotten that chance and he was not in the system, not only has he healed up and is doing better, he is now actively a peer mentor. That comes from a justice system that sees beyond the charge that's on the paper.
Thank you. Pastor Lamarr?
Well, I think that we have to understand the way you address, you got to catch them at their point of contact. And the point of contact is, number one, if it ain't the schools, and it got to be the rec center. If it ain't the rec center, it's got to be the courts. If it ain't the courts, there got to be some kind of institution with summer jobs or whatnot. And many of the churches are actively engaged in that. So, you know, we've got to reach them wherever their point of contact is and kind of build a relationship, like with relationship with the courts or with the schools and whatnot. And then we just got to be actively engaged in that, and just doing our best to try to impact their lives and be serious about impacting their lives, and serious about being that mentor where they can see that they can pick up the phone and call you and they can spend time with you.
Okay. Let me throw that question to Ms. Hicks. Ms. Hicks got a little caught up this morning, so I introduced Danella Hicks from the nonprofit organization of All That. Her program is fantastic. So I would like to ask you, let me ask you this portion specifically, since the other three have answered this one. Can you tell me about any successes that you know of or have come across that has been helpful for the youth?
So good morning, everybody. I would say one of the successes of our program is that we're here on a daily basis. So Monday through Friday between 9 and 4:30, we're here for students. We are partners with the Columbus City Schools. So we have received lots of phone calls from principals or teachers for students who need that contact with a caring adult in the community. So we have, this is a hard week for us, hard week for us. This morning, the reason I was late for the program is that we actually had the health department out to help our students actually go through a grieving process so that they could actually talk through just some of the concerns that they have with all the incidents that's been going on. So I would say one of our successes is that we're here. We see our students having someone to connect to. We're here. So.
Thank you. Let me ask this last question because I want to leave enough time because I have a couple of questions in the chat. What do you believe your role is as an active member of the faith-based community in assisting our youth in their success of not becoming another statistic of re-entering the juvenile justice system? Let's go with Pastor Parker first on that one.
My preaching must transcend making parishioners emotionally happy to making them productive and healthy. I have to have a strong sense of community beyond the walls. At the same time, a strong sense of spirituality. I'm a preacher of the gospel. I believe the prayers of the righteous make much available. We have to turn our people towards prayer, towards God, so they can have hope, because a hopeless community of individuals will give us a hail harvest of violence.
Amen to that. Pastor Lamarr?
Okay, I think mine is because I live where they are, I'm right and hands-on where they are. I think mine would favor the acronyms of SAME, S-A-M-E. Number one, I'm there to support them, okay, and whatever they find themselves in. Then number two, I'm there to advocate for them. That's to advocate for them, whether it's at the courts or whether it's with the police or whatever the case is. And then I'm there to be the M is for mentor, to mentor them and to give them an example, to spend time with them and to be there for them to bounce things off of, to give them another way to look at things. But I think you have to live among them to be the example for them. And then I'm there to try to educate them as far as, like Pastor Parker said, with my preaching transcends the pulpit and it comes out to everyday life. So when I'm talking to somebody, I could be just giving a sermon right there and talking to them. So in educating them about the things of God and how the things of God will relate into perfecting their lives. So SAME, S-A-M-E.
I like that. Ms. Hicks?
So, I always like to talk to kids instead of talking about them. And I think in so many cases, we see the issues that our kids have, but to inspire hope, we help them academically. So we want to make sure that our kids, that they know that they can be prepared. So when they graduate from high school, they can actually get jobs. We expose them to careers outside of their neighborhood. So we take them to places and we show them what life could look like if they were to actively engage. We do financial literacy with them to help them learn how to manage their money. We have anger management. We have healthy eating classes. But the main thing that we do, I think we talk to our kids about where they are, what they're actually going through. And it's not just a one-time touch. You know, we want to develop those relationships so that when they come and they tell us how they really feel, we can counteract their opinions and show them a different way of life.
Thank you. And lastly, Pastor Ford.
So I believe that our role as a church is a place of refuge for these youth in whatever they may need, whether that's, you know, my boots on the ground in the schools, having those conversations, building those relationships, or formulating programs and processes so that the kids know that they have somewhere to come and not just come for church or, you know, for a word or worship, but to come because they really need help. And so, you know, as far as my role is concerned, you know, it's the ability to utilize the tools and the resources that I gained being a public school teacher for 7 years, and utilizing that and bringing that toolkit to the church and figuring out how we can bridge that gap, if you will. And so the transcending of the preaching, definitely. I believe that has to be a priority, but nonetheless, utilizing the things that I've been blessed to be able to do in an effort to build better relationships and show them that there is a resource in Jesus and that there is a resource and a place of refuge within our church. And what I mean that is our community, meaning the people that are there, that there's somebody here that can help you, that can advocate for you, that can support you, and not only you, but your family. And so that's where I believe my role / our role as the Genesee Avenue Church is in our community.
Thank you. Thank you guys for answering all those questions. I appreciate it. I do have a couple of questions in the chat and we have about 10 minutes left. So let me get to those. The first question, and whoever wants to answer it can answer this question, says, how do we integrate a direct message of grace with our congregations, making them safe places for re-entering youth?
I'll jump in. We have to teach it to our members and letting them help them understand that no one is perfect and people make mistakes. I think it was Pastor Parker that brought this up, but just the root of the issue and getting down to that root and finding out the context, because oftentimes we'll deem a kid as this and that based on the action and not taking time to understand the root of the issue. So I believe that we have to teach and encourage our congregation to understand that and to be a church that looks at the issue in its entirety rather than just an isolated event in which that child may have gotten themselves caught up in.
We have to be a sanctuary in the real sense, not just the building. And we have to get rid of labels, because when you label, you can limit.
Ms. Hicks, I think you had your hand up. Did you want to answer that question as well?
I did. You know, I think we have to show genuine concern for the individual people and be transparent about our lives and what we've been through and just our hope for them. I think people respond, our youth definitely respond to people who genuinely care about them, who are real, who let them know that there is success, that there is hope. The teens that have come in our program, I think, have responded well to that. When I'm at the detention center and I'm talking to the young boys, I usually have the boys group, they respond well to the fact that you care. And so, you know, that you're not just having I guess, something that you say because you have to say it because you're getting funding, but that you genuinely care about them as people and that you want to see our community move in a positive direction.
I'll say too, my husband and I were the youth directors at our church there at the church across the Genesee Avenue with Brother Ford. And I would say, I think the biggest impact that you can do for your youth is, like everyone else has said already, is being there for them. We still have relationships with our youth that came through the church who have now graduated. And those youth still contact us to this day, and we still have that connection with them. So when you have a genuine connection with them, when you can come to them and not as, Sister Glover, but just as, someone who genuinely cares, someone who is not looking at them with judgmental eyes, someone who is approachable, and knowing that whatever it is that they confide in you, that is going to be, within you, and you're not going to run off and go tell grandma or go tell, mommy or auntie or daddy or whatever, unless it's a threat that needs to be addressed. I think just being able to know that you can be that person and that soundboard that they can talk to, and knowing that even beyond when the doors are closed at the church, that they can still reach out to you and you can be that sounding board for them.
And
yes.
I think one of the other is we have to duplicate ourselves, because whereas the pastor cannot reach everybody, you got to have a staff, that got the same passion as the pastor, got the same, mindset that the pastor has. So then they feel, so, okay, if I can't reach the pastor, I can reach the deacon. If I can't reach the deacon, I can reach a member, and they're going to treat me just like the pastor would have treated me. It's one thing, they come in and say, is Pastor Lamarr here? No, he's not here. Okay, come back then. No, instead of saying, well, what can we help you with? What you need? Right. They should feel the same earnestness with any of my members as they do with me.
Yes, I agree. The next question I have in here, Pastor Lamarr, I think this is directed to you. The question is, you mentioned getting calls to spend more time with the youth, but there has been a lack of dedicated mentors. Is there a formal process to become a mentor? I believe is the question. It sounds like they're currently working to develop a capacity at New Salem, and we are very early on the process of supporting youth who are or maybe just involved. Hold on, I'm trying to scroll down. We would like to hear more about what is needed regarding mentors and how they're connected to the youth. So the larger question to the group is, one of the speakers mentioned collaboration as opposed to just awareness, and he's wondering, is there a regular meeting of just as involved youth-centered organizations or institutions, and what would it take to even get a quarterly virtual meeting?
Well, as far as me, you just got to get the institution that the youth, because you got to meet the youth at the point of contact. The point of contact is whereas if it's the courts, then you've got to try to connect with somebody at the courts, like with a Judge Gill, with Ms. Kanika Glover, and say, look, okay, we got some people who want to be mentors. What do we have to do? Because every institution have different guidelines and whatnot. Now, if you're on the South Side and you want to be a part, we connect with schools on the South Side, we connect with church. It's just whatever institution you connect with, the guidelines they have. And you could say yourself, so okay, if we want to do it as New Salem, then New Salem would have something like, a community event. And at the community event, they reach out to people and people that come there, and they have them sign up, and they try to connect with them through them signing up and getting the information for them, and then find out what school they go to and whatnot. And then they can reach them from that standpoint.
And then also, I'll just add to that too, really quick, with Franklin County Court, we have the program called Project Faith. And if you have a developed program, and you're connected with a faith-based organization, you can take your organization, just as Pastor Lamarr, just as Pastor Parker, Pastor Ford, and Ms. Danella Hicks, and put that program into play, and you can create your mentors from that way as well. Mm-hmm. And so I have another question from Ms. Palmore.
Good afternoon. My name is Christian Bean, and I'm going to be performing How Can You Describe Our Face from Subways After Sleeping by David Mann.
I'm sorry, I don't know where that came from. She says, I am pleased to see the number of faith leaders working with our youth in Franklin County. courts in Franklin County detention system. Can any of you speak about work you are doing with the youth returning home from DYS? DYS is the Detention Youth Services. Pastor Lamarr, you might be more familiar with that. Have you worked with any individual youth that came from DYS?
Yes. When they get released and they come, they want to be a part of the program. We try to use them to try to help with some of the young ones, give them jobs. And most of them, we try to give them trying to teach them as far as lawn care. We try to teach them a business, try to teach them something that's going to keep them busy. So if it's a young man who's coming out of DYS and he comes to us, we mentor him and try to connect him, try to teach him. So, okay, what do you want to do with your life? And try to get him in something like, a lawn care business, or if it's a young lady, try to teach her about, doing hair and whatnot, try to get them to establish their own business mindset. So, they don't have to depend upon no one else, and the streets don't start calling them.
Yeah. When we have a youth come from DYS, one of our priorities also are where are they in their education, to get them to utilize the many different opportunities to graduate or get a GED. And of course, as Pastor said, job, vocation.
And let me share this. I don't know if you, I remember sharing the Suba a while back when she had a workshop. There's a school called AUS, Academy of Urban Scholars, and they do an excellent job with job placement, graduation, all those things, all wraparound services. They call me if a youth that I'm working with is not in school, they call me, so they can't get in contact with the parent, they call me. So that is a school that's doing excellent work in our communities.
Well, let me just say this. We could go on and continue to talk. I got to jump to another meeting, just like a couple of our panel guests do too. So let me just say, I would like to thank you all, Pastor Ford, Pastor Lamarr, Pastor Parker, and Ms. Danella Hicks for joining us today, but not only for joining us today, but for the countless time and hours that you put in and out, day on and day in, for the community, the work that you do of working with our youth in Franklin County. Our kids are dealing with so much. Whether that's just generational issues or whether that's just the injustice in the community and the injustice that they are constantly seeing on the TV. So at this point in time, all we can do is just hope and pray that all the efforts that are going on with everybody that's working in the community do not go in vain. So with that, I'm going to end our session. Again, my name is Kanika Glover. I'm the JDAI coordinator. I threw my email in the chat just in case you guys have questions, just in case you guys would like a copy of this this panel discussion, I can send that to you. So take my email down. It's Kanika_Glover@fccourts.org. And for that, I bid you all a goodbye. Have a great day.
778.
Pastor Lamarr.
Okay, thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Pastor Lamarr, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. How you doing?
I'm doing good, sir. I can't complain. How you been?
Oh man, it's uphill. It is uphill. It's never a dull moment on the South Side. And all this police shooting and everything going on now it just adds another layer to the problems.
I understand. But it's good seeing you, sir. It's good seeing you. Know that you're in my prayers.
Okay, is this the 11:30 meeting or is this the closeout? Kanika.
This is the closeout, and then do you have the other email that I sent last night so you can jump onto the other call? I'm getting ready to do it now. I was just jotting down some information.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Hey, Ms. Glover. Ms. Glover, this is Mr. Bean from Department of Youth Services. Kirsten wanted me to have you, why don't you send a note to the people that were on the call that they're interested in working with youth returning to Franklin County from Department of Youth Services. We certainly are willing to engage with them. I put my phone number in the chat. It's my state cell phone.
I
So
got it
perhaps we
right
can
here.
connect. Maybe, yeah. Why don't you call me this afternoon? Let's talk a little bit more.
Okay, I got a couple of meetings, so it'll probably be maybe around 4:30-ish today.
That's fine. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. I just jotted down your information before I got out of here. All right, you guys have a good one.
Very
Thank
good.
you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And I'll
Bye-bye.
see you at 1 o'clock.
All right, bye-bye. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.